We've already established from the previous parts that board knowledge is important, and minigames aren't the end-all be-all. So how does someone who isn't nearly as proficient in minigames end up influencing the board to win? When I'm talking about resources, I'm referring to your stars, coins, and items. After all, the main goal of Mario Party is to have the most stars, followed by coins, at the end of the game. However, items will have the most influence, so that the game is much more than just roll high to win. Items can also play a critical role in getting a valuable resource, which are bonus stars, which give you a star at the end of the game for meeting that achievement. Remember that my video series is more focused on Mario Party 6 and 7 due to their item system with traps. The other thing about 6 is that it's the first Mario Party to add the Orb Star as a bonus for the most items used, which is there to encourage item use and encourages more board influence overall. You also can get a decent amount of coins just for using them, so all the more reason to use them. On a basic level, orbs are either self-supportive, which are color-coded as either green or blue, or they are traps, which are color-coded as red or yellow. Traps from red orbs are a one-time use and trigger upon passing, but they cannot be covered, and they don't directly benefit the owner. Traps from yellow orbs can trigger indefinitely as long as it exists, but they can only trigger by landing, and they often directly benefit the owner, such as giving the owner coins. However, they are able to be covered by other players. All orbs can give the user coins for just using them, but yellows often give the most. While I won't necessarily dive into each item, which again would take its own series to do, I still think we could put items, both self-supportive and traps, into one of these three broad categories. Items that either impact your movement or position, such as rolling multiple dice, traps that warp you, flutter, etc. Items that either give you a resource or they take away a resource, such as Mario Party 7's Flower, Mr. Blizzard, any trap that steals coins. Item slots for protection against Boo or Chomp steals. Or bypassing gates. This last item category is more situational and makes one of your item slots overall more passive, so I think it's worth mentioning. As we know, figuring out the best route is key, and rolling high is going to help you have more influence on the board from having more interactions. The more influence you have on a game, the better odds you have of winning. As such, movement items should be prioritized. Items that also impact your position, or even the position of the star, such as Flutter, and someone who knows how to time the warp pipe, can also make people think twice about approaching the current star. On the other hand, a well-timed trap can help counter and discourage movement, or force your rival's hand sooner than they'd like. Remember what I said about resources on the map? It makes sense that players will gather where there are more resources, which are items and events. As such, try to set traps around those areas to make it more costly for your rivals to try and pick up a resource, or even prevent them from getting any. Sometimes you'll also want to set it before a junction, so that they're forced to run into it, and other times you might want to just discourage a specific pathway. Some items can be used more freely, while others need to be used with more careful timing. Note that it's likely everyone will be trying to keep up on Orb Star, and it's worth keeping track of, but instead of counting each turn everyone uses an item, keep track of how many turns you missed instead that you didn't use an item after turn 1. Since you can't use items on turn 1 and you can only pick them up, a perfect orb count is one less than a max turn count, so a perfect orb star would be 19 out of 19 in a 20 turn game, but this isn't always feasible on every map. It's also in your best interest to mentally keep track of what trap is where, both your own and your rivals. Obviously, it can be easy enough to forget, but if you know that you can afford to take a hit and it fundamentally doesn't change anything, take the hit and carry on. You don't want to miss a star because it might have cost you 10 coins to hit a trap on the way when you have plenty of coins, right? Likewise, try not to play into your rival's hand if you can afford it. Other bonuses can be influenced in some way by items. Mario Party 6 is the first Mario Party that introduces the very powerful Sluggish Room, where you essentially have a choice over your roll from 1 to 10, unless you hold Sluggish, which I've surprisingly seen way too many times. And this can help you not only land on specific spaces like happenings or duels, but also guarantee yourself to pass certain events. Mario Party 7 has a variety of bonuses, where 3 out of 6 are picked at random, and 2 of the newly added ones are running and shopping. With high movement item, you're much more likely to get the running star, and with spending your well-earned coins, you're much more likely to get items and get the shopping star as a result. So let's look into one of my older games to see a basic example of how to discourage movement items. On turn 8, I get a thwomp which forces your rival's turn to end wherever the trap is, and Ryan gets a mushroom that lets him roll 2 dice. I set my thwomp right in front of him and I go before Ryan does, so he has to run into it. When you're one space away from a trap that ends your turn, it obviously makes sense to not want to use your movement item, right? But this also pressures his item usage, and I do it enough times where I comfortably count out Ryan from this race for Orb Star. I do this again where Brian is forced into this dilemma as he is the only person in range to run into my next Thwomp trap. I set the Thwomp right before the orb so it delays a resource he can gather for at least another turn. He has to roll at least a 6 to hit my Thwomp this turn. This forces Ryan to either 1. Burn his resource and get way less value out of it, 2. Save his resources but overall risks having less influence and resources for the game. This time he burns his mushroom and gets thwomped as a result. I repeat this again as I got another thwomp and he has to roll at least a 7 to hit my thwomp this turn. He actually decides to not use his other mushroom and rolls high enough to hit it this turn by rolling a 10, but if he didn't hit it, he'd be in a much worse position, and I know Ryan would be stuck down there without much influence on this game. Ultimately, Ryan's orb count was actually pretty low this game, and this was a factor why, and I ultimately secured Orb Star for this game. Here's another example to discourage certain pathways and prevent resources from being gained. Ryan sets his spiny trap right before the junction to force me to run into it, while Ariel also sets her spiny right before the shop. I only have 23 coins and I need a minimum of 5 coins to buy an orb, so I ultimately go up and save the coins that I can, which is a great example to discourage certain pathways because I couldn't go to the shop as a result. With these examples of using resources and optimizing them, this should help a lot with planning. Next time, I'll be going over knowing your players and knowing your win conditions.